everybody, and welcome to The Shawning. Today I thought we'd do a little bit of a different episode. I thought instead of doing a movie review, we would do 5 movies that I think every horror fan should watch. This includes new horror fans, or even if you don't really like to watch scary movies all that much, but you want to treat yourself. These are 5 movies that I think everybody should see. Now I have them broken down into subcategory, so let's get started. Alright, the first category has to be the slasher. That's the most iconic and everybody knows about slasher movies. I am not going to say Halloween, because everyone usually says Halloween, and most people have actually probably seen Halloween already. So I think we should go with 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The reason I say that is because that movie is super ahead of its time. It is very terrifying, it's gory, and I mean, it'll scare you. Leatherface is a super menacing villain to begin with, and there's no way I wouldn't want to mess with anybody who's wielding a chainsaw. So, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974, has my vote all the way. For the horror comedy section, you really can't go wrong with anything Tim Burton, so I'm going to go with Tim Burton's Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice is an amazing movie, and even though people don't necessarily consider it horror, it definitely has several aspects of horror in it. Just the way that, the whole basis of the movie is based on dead people. So, it's pretty scary at times. The imagery is amazing, the colors that are used, claymation, of course, and Tim Burton is very good at just making things seem uneasy and creepy. So, I definitely would watch Beetlejuice, and if you haven't watched Beetlejuice already, you're missing out. You have Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, and many others. So I definitely would watch Beetlejuice. If you want something a little lighthearted, Beetlejuice is the one to go with. And of course, you have to have a creature feature, aka the classic monster film. There's different forms of monsters. You can have vampires, werewolves, zombies, etc. Personally, I think the best monster movie you could possibly watch would definitely be The Lost Boys. Vampires are awesome, and The Lost Boys is the perfect mix of modern and monster. Even though it's in the late 80s, 90s era, it's still perfect. You have Corey Haim, you have Kiefer Sutherland, you have Corey Feldman. The cast is, amazing. And again, that movie was very much well ahead of its time as well. The prosthetics, the makeup work, and the story overall, it's simple and it's straight to the point. You don't really have to think too much about it. You can just simply enjoy the movie for what it is. It's not super scary and gory, so it's perfect for people who are not into very gory, scary movies. So I definitely recommend The Lost Boys to anybody who likes vampires and who doesn't want to see nasty stuff. And of course, you have to include a ghost movie, paranormal, all that. You gotta have a good ghost movie. I'm gonna say The Conjuring. The original Conjuring is probably the most solid, scary movie involving paranormal ghosts, things like that I've ever watched. The scares are very effective in my opinion, and even though if you've seen it several times, it can be very predictable. The sequels can be predictable, let me rephrase. I will always recommend The Conjuring to anybody who is not big into horror movies, because that is a very good generic movie for them to watch. Generic probably was a poor choice of words. The setting is perfect. The way that you can tell that the setting is very oldened. They did very well to make it menacing and subtle. Peripheral scares are a big part of this movie. Peripheral scares are super effective because you don't know if you see it or not. So I personally loved this movie because of that reason alone. Peripheral scares are the way to go if you're going for a good classic ghost story. So The Conjuring gets my vote. And last and not least, I have to include a Stephen King adaptation. I love Stephen King, and I think most people who aren't big into super gory, scary movies would definitely appreciate Stephen King more, because it's more story-based versus horror-based, and I definitely think people can relate to that more so. I would say the new It would be good. Most people have an issue watching things that are too dated. And especially, I would definitely not go with the 1990 It for someone who is just now starting horror. It's my favorite movie of ever, but I don't think it would be a good recommendation for everybody. So I'm going to go with the original Pet Sematary. Pet Sematary is a super dark movie. I mean, the story helps, I mean, there's a lot of meat to the story, so it's not, just completely dark and twisted the entire film. You have some good dialogue and you have good character development and things like that. And you have a lot of likable characters. There is a lot of twisted elements. You have Gage, who is the little boy who gets hit by a semi and is brought back to life because of the dirty soil, or however they say it in the movie. I forgot. But I mean, it's a good movie. It is very, very effective. You get to see a super scary cat named Church, which is awesome, which is also the reason why every time I see a cat, I'm like, oh, we should name it Church. Don't be me. I definitely would recommend Pet Sematary. Now, if you're not a huge fan of Pet Sematary, you could always go for The Shining, which is more of a psychological horror. And that definitely ties in with another genre of horror. So those are just the Stephen King adaptations that I think everybody should definitely watch as well. But those are just 5 movies that I think every horror fan should definitely watch, or even if you haven't watched them or you're not a huge horror fan, I definitely think they're movies that you should check out. So, watch the movies. Tell me if you like them, because if you keep watching the scary movies, I'm always going to have something to talk about. So you keep watching them, I'll keep talking about them.